This came about as a result of statements in the press indicating or trying to imply that he had rejoiced over the assassination of President John Kennedy. A statement that Brother Malcolm had said at the time was that it was a case of the chickens coming home to roost. He had been saying all along that the violence, that whole violent atmosphere that had been created as a result of the movement, and by the government not doing anything about this, and in this case Kennedy was the president at the time, they had created a whole atmosphere of violence, and finally this violence had reached the White House.
The relationship between Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam rapidly deteriorated.
During the 90 days that I've been silent, I have come to the conclusion that I can best help spread the solution and the diagnosis that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gives of the so-called Negro problem in this country by continuing to remain out of the Nation of Islam and working on my own without restriction in the way that I think I best know how.
He felt that he was now a big man before the public, and this seemed to have been his desire. He wanted to be seen and heard. He wanted to exalt himself above his teacher.
The Nation of Islam, as it is guided spiritually by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, doesn't involve itself in politics in any form because of its failure to become actively involved in the struggle of the Negroes overall. Many persons in the past have drifted away from it and are now becoming involved with us in an active effort to work with other groups toward solving the political, social, and economic evils that afflict our people.
Malcolm X now advanced his own program for black Americans. He formed the Organization of Afro-American Unity, dedicated to the philosophy of black nationalism.
Which means that the black man should control the politics of his own community and control the politicians who are in his own community. My personal economic philosophy is also black nationalism, which means that the black man should have a hand in controlling the economy of the so-called Negro community. He should be developing the type of knowledge that will enable him to own and operate the businesses and thereby be able to create employment for his own people, for his own kind.
Malcolm X made 2 trips to Africa, including a pilgrimage to Mecca to become an Orthodox Muslim. His meetings with African leaders to seek their support attracted the attention of the U.S. Justice and State Departments.
Well, my purpose here is to remind the African heads of state that there are 22 million of us in America who are also of African descent, and to remind them also that we are the victims of America's colonialism or American imperialism, and that our problem is not an American problem, it's a human problem. It's not a Negro problem, it's a problem of humanity. It's not a problem of civil rights, but a problem of human rights.
What he ultimately was aiming for at a foreign policy level was to have the government, the U.S. government, have to defend its inaction in terms of the racist attacks that were going on at that time, to defend its actions before the UN Commission on Human Rights and take it before the World Court.
Malcolm, are you prepared to go into the United Nations at this point and ask that charges be brought against the United States for its treatment of American Negroes?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, please. I think you're right in my chair. The audience will have to be quiet. Yes, as I pointed out when I was during my traveling, that nations African nations and Asian nations and Latin American nations look very hypocritical when they stand up in the United Nations condemning the racist practices of South Africa and that which is practiced by Portugal and Angola, and saying nothing in the UN about the racist practices that are manifest every day against Negroes in this society.
Are you prepared to work with some of the leaders of the other civil rights organizations?
Certainly. Certainly. We will work with any groups, organizations, or leaders in any way, as long as it's genuinely designed to get results.
Malcolm X received many threats, but an attempted poisoning in Africa made him believe the danger went beyond the Nation of Islam. On December 3rd, 1964, he took part in this debate in Oxford, England.
And I live in a society whose social system is based upon the castration of the black man, whose political system is based on castration of the black man, and whose economy is based upon the castration of the black man. He came up with what they call a civil rights bill in 1964, supposedly to solve our problem, and after the bill was signed, 3 civil rights workers were murdered in cold blood. Civil rights bill down the drain. No matter how many bills pass, black people in that country where I'm from, still our lives are not worth 2 cents. Well, anytime you live in a society supposedly based upon law, and it doesn't enforce its own law because the color of a man's skin happens to be wrong, then I say those people are justified to resort to any means necessary to bring about justice where the government can't give them justice.
Malcolm X's influence was strong among young people, especially for some members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
So many people in SNCC who didn't even know who Malcolm was began to sit up and take notice. So here in SNCC, it became first thought, right, Malcolm X is having an effect where you don't even think he's having an effect, so people began to look closer. Of course, the closer they looked to Malcolm X, the quicker they got hooked on Malcolm X.
Early in 1965, SNCC and Dr. Martin Luther King joined forces for a voting rights campaign in Selma, Alabama. When SNCC invited Malcolm X to speak in Selma, he reaffirmed his willingness to support other civil rights leaders.
And I think that the people in this part of the world would do well to listen to Dr. Martin Luther King and give him what he's asking for and give it to him fast before some other factions come along and try to do it another way. What he's asking for is right. That's the ballot. And if he can't get it the way he's trying to get it, then it's going to be got one way or the other.
On February 14, 1965, Malcolm X's home was bombed as he and his family slept inside.
Had you had any threats, anything like this?
Had any threats? That's all I get is threats. I get not less than 6 or 7 threatening phone calls every day.
And the phone rang, and I picked it up. It was a morning, and a Saturday morning, as I recall. And this voice came on and asked and started talking. And I'm wondering, who is it? I didn't understand. I didn't recognize the voice. And finally, something he said made me realize with a great shock, my shock, that was Malcolm X. And for the first time in our whole acquaintance of years, I really didn't perceive who he was. The thing was, he was under such pressure that it was as if it had constricted his vocal cords. He just felt, I guess, as near desperate as I ever saw him, because, again, here's the image of the fearsome, indomitable Malcolm X. But bottom line was, he was a father, and he was a husband, and his wife and his daughters were imperiled. And what could he do about it?
My house was bombed. It was bombed by the black Muslim movement upon the orders of Elijah Muhammad.
But within the week, Malcolm X expressed doubt that the Muslims were responsible. He planned to speak again the following Sunday at the Audubon Ballroom.
I was going to the Audubon that day, had been out the night before reading, had gotten lazy, and had said simply, I'll go next week. And so proceeded to go into the kitchen, put some coffee on, turn on the radio. In my little apartment there, I had a little black and white kitchen table with these little black chairs. And I had this little black radio on that table. And I clicked the radio on as I stood there thinking about what had happened the night before. Turned towards the stove to pick up my coffee. And the flash came through on this station and said, Malcolm had been assassinated.
Malcolm X was killed by 16 gunshots fired at close range. He was 39 years old.
And my children were crying, what's going on? What's going on? Are they going to shoot us? And I just knew they had shot him.
And that night we went into the Harlem community to walk and mingle with the people. There was a kind of sense of loss. And as we passed people, some who were even strangers, we would stop and greet each other and say what this man had meant to us.